Tycoon abandoned his pregnant wife for a younger woman. Years later, she's a CEO raising triplets. The rain was gentle that evening in Seoul. The sky glowed in hues of lavender and gold, as if nature itself were celebrating something tender and fragile. Inside a quiet penthouse apartment that overlooked the Han River, the air was warm, filled with the soft scent of chamomile tea and freshly baked bread. Jaiwoo stood by the window, one hand resting on her belly, the other gently tracing the outline of the glass. Her eyes followed the lights shimmering on the water, but her mind was far from the city. She was thinking of the tiny life inside her, a miracle she had yet to share. Behind her, the apartment was neatly arranged, every cushion fluffed, every surface polished. She had spent hours preparing Miho's favorite dishes, even wearing the cream sweater he once said made her look like sunlight. Everything was perfect. Miho was late. He often was lately, but tonight felt different. Tonight, she believed, he would come home with a smile, and when she told him the news, he would lift her in his arms like he did when they first married. She turned when she heard the door click open. Miho, her voice, soft and melodic, echoed through the hallway. Miho stepped inside, removing his coat with mechanical ease. His suit was sharp, expensive, his tie slightly loosened. His face, however, held no trace of warmth. "You're home," she said, smiling, walking toward him. "Yeah," he replied curtly, barely meeting her gaze. "Long day." "I figured," she said gently. "I made dinner, your favorite, braised short ribs, and I have something to tell you." Miho glanced at the table, then at her. "Can we not tonight? I'm tired, but this is important." His sigh was heavy, his shoulders dropping as if her voice had weight he didn't want to carry. Jaiwoo felt her chest tighten, but she steadied herself. She reached for his hand and placed it over her stomach. "I'm pregnant." For a moment there was silence. Miho blinked, then slowly pulled his hand away. "How long?" "Almost 3 months." She waited for joy, for surprise, for even shock. Anything but what came. Miho turned away. "I thought we talked about waiting." "We did, but this wasn't planned, Miho. It just happened. And I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought you'd be happy." His tone turned cold. "I have enough going on right now. The board is pressuring me. The expansion into China is a mess. I can't deal with this too." "This?" she repeated, stunned. "Miho, this is our child." He didn't reply. Instead, he walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of wine, and downed it in one swallow. Jaiwoo stood there, the warmth in her chest turning into something else. A slow, creeping chill. She had married Miho 5 years ago, when he was still building his empire. She had believed in him, supported him through every sleepless night, every failed pitch, every heartbreak. Together, they had built a life, or so she thought. She remembered their first apartment, tiny and crowded, where they would sit on the floor and dream about their future. Children, a big house, laughter echoing in the halls. He would kiss her temple and say, "As long as you're with me, I have everything." Now he couldn't even look at her. That night, Jaiwoo lay awake in their bed, staring at the ceiling, while Miho typed on his laptop beside her. The blue light flickered across his face like a veil, shielding him from her. She turned to him. "Do you still love me?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, it was barely a whisper. "I don't know." Jaiwoo felt as if the air had been punched from her lungs. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. She didn't want to cry. Not in front of him. Not like this. But the worst part wasn't his answer. It was the absence of pain in his voice, as if he had already made peace with it, as if she no longer mattered. The next morning, she woke up to find the bed empty. The smell of his cologne still lingered in the air, but he was gone. No note, no goodbye, just silence. She touched her belly and whispered, "I'm still here, we're still here." And though her heart felt shattered, something else began to rise quietly beneath the sorrow. A flicker of fierce, maternal love. She had always been soft, gentle, the kind of woman who smiled at strangers, who cried at sad movies, who believed that love conquered all. But now, she would need to become something else. Because from that day forward, Jaiwoo knew. She couldn't depend on Miho. Not anymore. The child inside her, her child, would need more than hope and promises. It would need strength, and she would give it. No matter when the mornings, she would pretend to be asleep as he got dressed. She could hear the soft click of his watch clasp, the scent of his cologne brushing the air, and the hollow way the door closed behind him. And yet, Jaiwoo held on. She tried to believe this was temporary, that he was simply stressed, that the man she loved was still somewhere behind that cold stare and silence. After all, hadn't they weathered worse storms before? Hadn't they promised each other forever? But something had changed. Miho didn't just seem distant. He seemed removed, like he was watching her from the outside of a glass wall and not bothering to break through. She began noticing little things. His phone always on silent. The late-night texts he tried to hide. The second phone he thought she didn't know about, tucked deep in his briefcase. The way he flinched when she reached for his hand in public. And the look in his eyes. Gone was the softness. Gone was the boy who used to run in the rain just to make her laugh. In his place was a man shaped by ambition, by hunger for more power, more freedom, more of something she no longer fit into. One evening, she waited for him with a hopeful heart. She had framed the first sonogram photo. The baby was still small, but it had tiny hands, little shadows of life that made her cry every time she looked at them. She placed the frame on the dining table next to a lit candle, praying it would stir something in him. He walked in late again, his tie undone, the smell of wine clinging to his breath. "You're drunk," she said softly, not accusatory, just tired, just had drinks with investors. Big deal coming through. She gestured toward the table. "I wanted to show you something." Miho followed her eyes, and when he saw the photo, he let out a short, breathless laugh. "You really think that changes anything?" Jaiwoo's heart cracked just a little more. "You're talking about our child, Miho." "No," he said, his voice sharpening. "You're talking about your child. I didn't ask for this." She stared at him, the words hitting like glass against her skin. "You asked for me, didn't you?" she whispered. "You said we were building a future together. That was before everything changed. Before I realized—" He paused, looking away. "Before you realized what?" He didn't answer. The next morning, Jaiwoo went into his office while he showered. Her hands trembled as she opened his laptop, knowing she was betraying a boundary, but desperate for truth. It didn't take long. Emails, calendar appointments, dinners that were not listed on the official company schedule. Photos, one of them at a rooftop bar, her head on his shoulder. The woman was young, pretty, fresh out of graduate school. Sora. Jaiwoo blinked through the tears as she stared at the screen. That night, she said nothing. She tucked herself in next to him, closed her eyes, counted her breaths, and for the first time, she didn't cry. The pain had become too heavy for tears. A week later, a headline appeared on a business site. Tycoon Miho Han seen with mystery woman at art gala. Wife absent from event. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Friends, reporters, even her mother. But Jaiwoo didn't answer. She stared at the screen, a photo of Miho holding the girl's waist, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at her in months. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and breathed deeply. When Miho returned that evening, she was sitting at the table, waiting. He stopped when he saw her expression. "Jaiwoo," he said cautiously, "I didn't expect you to be home." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. Her voice came out like frost. "You've been lying to me. I saw the photos. I read the messages." Miho looked down, saying nothing. "How long has it been?" she asked. He hesitated. 6 months. Jaiwoo closed her eyes. That meant even before the pregnancy, before the distance, before all the small excuses. "I need you to understand something," she said, steadying herself. "This child will be born, with or without you, Jaiwoo. And if you think you can come and go in our lives as you please, Think again. She stood, walked to the bedroom, and this time he slept on the couch. 2 days later, divorce papers arrived not from Jaiwoo, but from Miho, a neatly folded set of documents left on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation, just a signature and a blank space where she was meant to sign. The night she finally signed them, it was raining again. She sat on the floor, surrounded by boxes of her things. The apartment would go back to him. The company cars, the assistants, the penthouse, all tied to his empire. All things she had helped build. But he had made sure she'd walk away with nothing. Almost nothing. She still had the sonogram. The baby. The quiet heartbeat inside her. She ran her fingers over her belly again and whispered, "We'll be okay." And then, like a soft promise to herself, "No, we'll be more than okay." Because somewhere in the grief and humiliation, something was beginning to burn in her. A slow, steady fire that refused to die. He had broken her heart, stripped her of everything, but she still had herself, and she still had something he would never take back. A new life. 3 tiny heartbeats, still unknown to the world. Jaiwoo didn't know yet what she would do, where she would go, but for the first time, her love for Miho didn't hurt, felt gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Conviction, because now there was this. She clutched her purse against her chest, fingers brushing the folded ultrasound image inside. Her coat was soaked from the rain, her shoes muddy from running, and her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. "Miss Jaiwoo Han?" A nurse stepped out from the examination room, soft-spoken but alert. Jaiwoo stood quickly. "Yes, I'm here. Please come in. The doctor will explain everything." Inside, the room smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender. Dr. Yoon, a kind-faced man in his 40s, offered her a seat. Jaiwoo sat, nervously fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. "Is the baby okay?" Dr. Yoon smiled gently. "Babies?" Jaiwoo blinked. "I'm sorry? You're carrying 3, Miss Han." Her mouth fell slightly open. 3. Triplets. All stable, all measuring well. But with triplets, there are risks and your body is already showing signs of strain. "We're going to need to monitor you closely from now on." She nodded, stunned, absorbing each word like distant echoes. 3. She was carrying 3 lives. 3 heartbeats. Alone. The weight of it pressed on her chest like a tidal wave. "Is there someone we can call?" the doctor asked carefully. "A partner, maybe?" Jaiwoo opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. The words felt foreign, too heavy. "No," she said quietly. "There's no one." She left the hospital with 3 new ultrasound prints, a folder of prenatal instructions, and a storm of fear inside her. The rain had stopped. The city had quieted. But in her chest, everything screamed. Back at her apartment, Jaiwoo stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pale. She looked like someone else. Not the wife of a tycoon. Not the girl who once believed in fairy tales. Just a woman trying to hold herself together. She touched her belly, whispering softly, "I'm scared." The silence that followed was vast. But something stirred inside her. A flutter, like the brush of butterfly wings. Her eyes widened. Was that? Another flutter, gentle but real. She pressed her palm against the skin and laughed through the tears that came pouring down. "You heard me, didn't you?" That night, Jaiwoo didn't sleep. She sat beside the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the moon drift through the clouds. Her thoughts circled the same truth. She couldn't stay in this apartment. Not with memories on every wall. Not in this city, where every street reminded her of Miho. He had taken everything, but he hadn't taken her. She began packing the next morning. Slowly, silently, one box at a time. She placed the wedding photo face down in the trash. She folded the designer coats she used to wear to his corporate dinners. And when she reached the shelf where her dreams had once lived, architectural plans, concept drawings, her old thesis from university, she paused. She picked up a sketch she had drawn in college. A sustainable housing complex built along the coast, designed to bring beauty and healing to neglected communities. She had shown it to Miho once. He said it was too soft, not ambitious enough. But Jaiwoo stared at it now with new eyes. Maybe it wasn't too soft. Maybe softness was strength in disguise. She called only one person. "Hello?" A sleepy voice answered. "Jaiwoo." "Hyrin." Her voice cracked. "Can I come stay with you for a while?" There was no hesitation. Come now." By nightfall, Jaiwoo was on a train. A single suitcase beside her and the ultrasound prints clutched like a lifeline. The city lights disappeared behind her, and she watched the darkness of the countryside swallow them whole. She didn't look back. The seaside town where Hyrin lived was quiet, cradled between hills and ocean. It smelled of salt and pine, and the air was thick with the hum of cicadas. Jaiwoo stepped off the train and into her new life with shoes still damp and eyes red from exhaustion. But something in her heart had shifted. She was no longer waiting for rescue. Hyrin's home was small but warm, with sun-worn furniture and the scent of ginger tea in every corner. Jaiwoo slept for 2 full days, waking only to eat and cry and sleep again. And then, finally, she stood up. She began taking walks by the ocean every morning. She breathed deeply, placing one foot in front of the other, listening to the wind. Her body was growing heavier, her ankles swelling, but she felt lighter than she had in weeks. One afternoon, as she sat on a bench sketching ideas in her old notebook, a little girl passed by holding her grandmother's hand. The girl stopped, pointed to Jaiwoo's belly and said, "Is there a baby in there?" Jaiwoo smiled. "3, actually," the little girl gasped. "3? Like triplets?" Jaiwoo nodded, and for the first time the word didn't scare her. She felt them again that night. Not just flutters, but kicks. Tiny reminders that she was not alone. That inside her grew 3 lives who depended entirely on her strength. She whispered to them, "You don't know me yet, but I promise I'll give you the world." And with that promise, something inside her hardened. A seed of resolve. She would not raise her children in shame. She would not let them feel unwanted, like she had. She would give them a future built not on someone else's empire, but on her own 2 hands. The road ahead was uncertain. She had no job, no income, no clear plan, but she had 3 reasons to keep going. And that would be enough. She was nearly 8 months along now. The doctors had told her it could happen any day. With triplets, there were no promises, only possibilities. The thought haunted her, clinging to the edges of her mind when she tried to sleep. But something else had started haunting her too. Miho, not the man she once loved, but the version of him now, the stranger who walked away. Because earlier that day she'd seen him, not in person, but on the news. She hadn't been looking for it. She had been flipping through the channels while folding baby clothes, half laughing at the ridiculous sizes of the newborn onesies. When the screen froze on a headline that pierced straight through her, Han Corporation CEO Miho Han appears with new flame at charity gala. There he was, smiling, dressed in a crisp navy suit, his arm wrapped around her waist, Sora. She wore red, a color Jaiwoo had always loved but never dared to wear beside him. "Pregnant women just don't look good in red," he once said offhandedly. She had laughed back then. It didn't feel funny now. Hyrin walked in just as Jaiwoo stood up, eyes glazed, the remote slipping from her hand. "Jaiwoo?" she said, worried. "What's wrong?" Jaiwoo didn't answer. She walked slowly to the bathroom, closed the door, and turned on the faucet to drown the noise. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was rounder now, the curve of motherhood changing her. Her eyes held a different light. Not broken, not whole either, but something carved from pain and survival. She touched the mirror and whispered, "Did he ever really love me?" A kick jolted her back. She gasped, hand flying to her stomach. Another kick, and another, then a sudden sharp pain that made her knees buckle. She opened the door. "Hyrin!" she cried, grabbing the frame. "Oh my God, Jaiwoo, what's happening?" "I don't know," she whispered, panic rising. "Something's wrong." Hyrin didn't hesitate. She grabbed the keys and her coat, supporting Jaiwoo's weight as they rushed to the car. The rain was still falling hard, making it almost impossible to see. The world outside blurred into streaks of light and water as they sped toward the hospital. Inside the car, Jaiwoo clutched her belly, breathing through clenched teeth. "They can't come yet," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It's too early." "You're going to be okay," Hiram said, voice shaking. "You are. Hold on." The hospital was ready. Doctors and nurses moved swiftly, voices low but urgent. 33 weeks, someone said. "Multiples. We need to stabilize her." Jaiwoo was wheeled away, fluorescent lights passing above like stars blinking in fast motion. Everything felt too bright, too loud. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum of war. Then a voice, a soft, kind one, broke through the noise. "Miss Han, we're going to do everything we can, but we need you to be strong now. For them." Jaiwoo nodded. Her breath came fast, but her grip on the nurse's hand was strong. The next hours were a blur of machines and voices, of pain and waiting. And then silence. Piercing, awful silence. "Why can't I hear them?" she gasped. "Why can't I?" "They're here," a doctor said quickly. "They're breathing, small but strong. They're fighting." Jaiwoo cried then, deep from the center of her being. Not out of fear anymore, out of relief. She didn't see them right away. They had been rushed to NICU, incubated like delicate stars floating in glass boxes. But later, in the quiet of her hospital room, a nurse came in with a photo. All three, tiny, red-faced, beautiful. One had his hand curled into a fist. Another was yawning. The third had his head turned toward the light. Jaiwoo pressed the photo to her heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I wanted to keep you safe longer. I tried." Hiram entered, her face tired but relieved. "You did it," she said gently. "No," Jaiwoo replied. "They did it. They saved me." The next morning, Jaiwoo was wheeled into NICU. She cried again when she saw them. Machines beeped. Tubes ran like threads of life. But her babies were alive, breathing. And when she placed her hand inside the incubator, one of them curled his tiny fingers around hers. That night, Jaiwoo sat alone beside the glass, watching them sleep. Her heart ached in ways she never imagined. Not from pain, but from love so fierce it frightened her. And in that silence, a thought came quietly, like a whisper in her soul. "You're not weak. You never were." She thought of Miho, of the apartment she left behind, of the way he turned his back on her, on them. And for the first time, she didn't feel like the woman he abandoned. She felt like the woman who survived. They had names now. She whispered them the night she chose them, alone under the fluorescent light. Jae, Hajun, and Little Somin. Names that felt like sunlight breaking through a long, bitter winter. But outside the sterile walls of the NICU, the world didn't stop. On her 5th day at the hospital, a nurse knocked gently on her door. Jaiwoo turned, expecting a smile or an update, but the nurse held something else entirely. A thick white envelope, gold-lettered at the top. Legal action. Custody review. Han Corporation Legal Affairs. Jaiwoo's throat tightened as she reached for it. Her hands shook before she even opened it. Inside, a formal letter stamped with Miho's lawyer's seal. He was petitioning for paternity verification, for custody rights, not out of love, not out of concern, but because the media had begun whispering about her, about them, and now he wanted control of the narrative of the children of her life. She gripped the edges of the letter so tightly it nearly tore in half. That night, when Hiram came to visit, Jaiwoo didn't speak at first. She just held the letter out with trembling fingers. Hiram read in silence, her eyes narrowing with every line. "He's unbelievable," she finally whispered. "After everything? Now he wants them." Jaiwoo sat down heavily. He doesn't want them. He wants power. If word gets out he abandoned his pregnant wife and 3 premature babies, his company will fall apart. He's using them. Jaiwoo nodded. "Just like he used me." There was silence, the kind that sinks into your bones. And then Jaiwoo spoke again, softer, steadier. He doesn't know them. He's never even seen them. But now that the world is watching, he suddenly wants to play father. Are you going to fight it? Hiren asked, her voice already holding fire. Jaiwoo looked out the window at the blinking hospital sign across the street. She thought of the day Miho had left the divorce papers on the counter like they were nothing. Thought of how he'd smiled on television while she'd bled alone in the bathroom, terrified the babies were going to come too soon. I'll fight, she said finally, but not for revenge. For them. They deserve better than a man who saw them as inconvenience before they even had names. Later that evening, as she returned to the NICU in a wheelchair, she sat longer than usual. Nurses whispered around her, giving her space. The soft beeping of machines filled the silence. She leaned close to the incubators, her eyes full of tears. I don't know how to protect you from everything, she whispered to her sleeping sons and daughter. But I swear to you, I will never let anyone use you. Not for business. Not for shame. Not even your own father. One of the babies stirred little Somin, and a tiny hand reached up in the air. Jaiwoo touched the glass. It was enough. The next morning, she met with a lawyer. Not the expensive kind Miho had. A local woman named Yunseo, who had worked for families escaping domestic abuse, for mothers fighting impossible odds. She had a soft voice, but steel in her eyes. I'm not rich, Jaiwoo began, ashamed, and I don't have influence, but I have proof. I have a timeline, medical records, his abandonment, his mistress, the media, everything. Yunseo listened patiently, took notes, nodded. You have more than that, she said. You have a story, a truth, and if you're willing to speak it, we'll make them hear it. Jaiwoo felt something flicker inside her again. That quiet fire. She was tired, still healing, still afraid. But now she wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to fight. A week passed. Her babies gained weight slowly. They breathed better. Somin even opened her eyes one morning, and Jaiwoo sobbed quietly, afraid to move, afraid to wake from the beauty of it. Then one morning, a nurse entered with tight lips and a clipboard. Miss Han, she said, you have a visitor. Jaiwoo frowned. Who? He said he's the father of the children. The air left the room. Jaiwoo stood, heart hammering. Tell him to leave. He said he has legal right to visitation, ma'am. Felt like a slap. Her fingers curled into fists. Her vision blurred. She walked slowly, each step burning. Down the hall, past the nursery, to the lobby, and there he was, Miho, in a charcoal coat, hair perfectly styled, phone in hand, looking at her like she was an old acquaintance he had almost forgotten. Jaiwoo, he said calmly, you look well. She stopped a few feet away, barely breathing. You're not welcome here, she said. I'm their father. I have a right to see them. Her voice rose, shaky but strong. You lost that right the moment you chose a press conference over your own children. Miho's face twitched, just for a moment. But he recovered. This isn't personal. It's about responsibility. I need to be part of their lives. No, she snapped. You need to control the story. You're scared people will find out what you did. That you left me pregnant and alone while you danced with your new mistress in front of flashing cameras. He stepped closer, dropping his voice. Jaiwoo, let's not do this in public. She met his gaze, eyes burning. I will do this wherever it needs to happen. You will not parade through my life like nothing happened. You don't get to choose when it's convenient to be a father. He opened his mouth, but Jaiwoo held up a hand. If you want a war, she whispered, I'll give you one, but you're not walking into that NICU. And then, like she had never been able to before, Jaiwoo turned her back on him. This time she wasn't crying. This time she wasn't afraid. She walked down the corridor to where her children waited. And behind her, Miho stood frozen, realizing too late. She wasn't the woman he left behind. She was something stronger. She didn't talk about it. Not to Hiren. Not to the nurses. Not even to the babies who were finally breathing on their own now, their cheeks gaining color, their fingers growing stronger. But every time she looked at them through the glass, she felt the echo of Miho's voice. "I'm their father." She hated how those words still made her skin crawl. He didn't come back after that first confrontation. Not in person. But his presence crept into her life like smoke through cracks. Messages from his lawyers, requests for visitation, veiled threats about public perception, questions about medical decisions. "You'd think he actually cared," Jaiwoo muttered bitterly one evening, folding tiny clothes beside Hyerin. "He doesn't care," Hyerin said. "He's afraid. You have the truth. He has a reputation." Jaiwoo nodded but said nothing. Her fingers paused over a soft yellow onesie. She lifted it to her face, inhaled the scent of clean fabric and baby powder, and whispered, "They'll never know what it feels like to be disposable. I won't let them." 2 weeks later, she was discharged from the hospital. The babies remained in NICU, but she could visit every day, which she did, arriving at dawn and leaving after sunset, spending hours reading to them, humming lullabies, sketching designs in a notebook on her lap. The rest of her time she spent quietly rebuilding. No money, no job, but Jaiwoo had fire. She reached out to old contacts, former classmates, even professors. One by one, doors began to crack open. But it wasn't just work she needed. It was a home, a place where her babies could grow, where she could breathe again, where the past wouldn't chase her down every hallway. One afternoon, Hyerin walked into the kitchen, holding a crumpled flyer in her hand. "You need to see this," she said, dropping it onto the table. Jaiwoo unfolded it slowly. It was a local redevelopment notice. An old coastal building was being auctioned. Abandoned, forgotten, but structurally sound. Formerly a community center. "I can't afford this," Jaiwoo said immediately. "You could fight for it," Hyerin replied. "Pitch a restoration plan. Offer a design in exchange for ownership. They're desperate. They'd listen." Jaiwoo stared at the image, broken windows, cracked walls, rusted rails, and saw something no one else would. A beginning. That night, she visited the site. The building was nothing more than a skeleton. Empty corridors, peeling paint, a roof that needed patching. But it overlooked the ocean. The same ocean where she had once walked, heartbroken, afraid. Now, standing in the doorway with the wind brushing her hair, Jaiwoo whispered, "This could be ours." And just like that, she began to dream again. The next few days were a blur of sketches, cost projections, sustainable plans, even childcare spaces. She proposed turning the building into a creative and wellness center for single mothers. A place where women could work, heal, and live with dignity. A place built not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been left behind. She presented the idea to the committee in a room filled with skeptical men. One of them looked at her and said, "You think people will donate to this out of pity?" Jaiwoo straightened her back. "No," she said. "They'll donate because they'll see themselves in it. Because everyone's been broken at least once. And everyone wants a place to belong again." When she finished, the room was quiet. No one clapped. But 2 weeks later, she received an email with the subject line, "Approval, restoration proposal accepted." Jaiwoo screamed when she read it, waking Hyerin and startling the baby's night nurse at the hospital. She didn't care. She laughed until her voice cracked, and then cried, holding the printed email to her chest like a lifeline. But with that joy came a new fear. Miho wasn't finished. News of her project spread quickly through the community. A local paper ran a story on the mother who rose again, with a side note about her triplets and the silence of their famous father. Public sympathy grew. Jaiwoo's face was being recognized. Donations began to trickle in. People believed in her, and Miho hated losing control. One evening, Jaiwoo left the hospital just after sunset. The sky was purple with dying light. She had just kissed the babies goodnight and was walking toward her car when a sleek black vehicle pulled up beside her. A window rolled down. "Sora," her voice, smooth and bitter. "Do you really think this little act of yours will last?" Jaiwoo stopped. Her hands tightened at her sides. "What are you doing here?" Sora leaned forward, resting her arm on the edge of the window. You think the world is going to cheer for you just because you've got 3 babies and a sob story? This isn't a drama, Jaiwoo. It's real life. People forget. People move on. You'll fade. Jaiwoo didn't flinch. No, she said. You will. Sora's smile faltered. Jaiwoo stepped closer. You have Miho. You have the money, the status. Why are you still here, trying to ruin me? Sora's voice dropped. Because you make him remember who he used to be. Jaiwoo blinked, and in that moment, something inside her clicked. Miho wasn't just afraid of scandal. He was afraid of her power to redefine the story. She had risen without him, in spite of him, and now every step forward she took made him look smaller. Sora drove away without another word. Jaiwoo stood in the parking lot, alone under the dim hospital light, the sea wind rushing past her face. But this time she didn't feel cold. She felt ready. 3 tiny bodies swaddled in matching blue, cream, and soft lavender. 3 little faces so fragile, so impossibly real. She thought her heart would burst just from looking. Somin, Jae, and Hajun. Her universe. Her reason. Tears slid silently down her cheeks as she whispered, "Hi, it's me. I'm your mom." Somin yawned. Jae squirmed. Hajun let out the faintest squeak of protest, which made her laugh through her sobs. They were finally out of NICU, cleared to go home, and Jaiwoo had never been more terrified in her life. She rode home in the back seat, all 3 car seats lined beside her, Hiren at the wheel. Her fingers never stopped moving, adjusting a strap here, brushing a cheek there, checking their breathing every few seconds. "I don't know how I'm going to do this," Jaiwoo murmured. "You will," Hiren said without hesitation. "You already are." The house was still under construction, so they were living in a temporary rented space near the coast. A cozy 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet, but enough love to fill a palace. The first night was a blur. 3 feedings, 3 diapers, 3 different cries. By dawn, Jaiwoo hadn't slept a minute. Her body felt like it had been through war, her mind frayed, her eyes burning from exhaustion. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, rocking Somin while the boys slept. She looked down at her daughter, who stared back with wide, curious eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she whispered, "but I'll never stop trying." Days passed in a blur of lullabies, bottle warmers, and midnight pacing. Jaiwoo quickly lost track of time. Her once perfect hair was always in a bun. Her designer clothes replaced by milk-stained sweaters. Her phone full of alarms and feeding logs and desperate Google searches. And yet, her heart had never felt more full. But exhaustion wasn't the only thing gnawing at her. One afternoon, while the babies slept in their bassinets and Hiren made soup in the kitchen, Jaiwoo scrolled through her phone out of habit, only to freeze. Her name was trending. Jaiwoo Han, ex-wife of Tycoon Miho Han, speaks out about rebuilding after betrayal. Single mom of triplets opens creative center for women. Public fundraiser hits 200K in donations. From abandoned wife to CEO. The story everyone's watching. Jaiwoo blinked. She hadn't expected this. Hiren walked in just as Jaiwoo dropped the phone on the table. "What is it?" "They found me," she said softly. "Everyone." The article had quoted parts of a small interview she gave to a local paper about her project. Somehow it had gone viral. The internet had pieced together who she was, the timeline, the babies, Miho's scandalous relationship with Sora. And now, she was a symbol. The comments were flooding in. "You're stronger than most of us, Jaiwoo. Your story gave me hope. This woman is a queen." Jaiwoo didn't feel like a queen. She felt like a woman still piecing herself back together with glue and whispered promises. But something stirred inside her. Something quiet and strong. That evening, as she rocked Jay to sleep, her phone buzzed again. A message. No name. Just a number. "You've had your moment. Don't push it." She stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't respond, but she didn't delete it either. Later that night, Hiren found her standing in the hallway, staring at the door. "You think he'll try something?" Hiren asked. "I don't know," Jaiwoo answered. But he's watching. I can feel it. The next day, a letter arrived by courier. Not from Miho's lawyers. From his father. Jaiwoo opened it slowly, sitting at the kitchen table while the babies napped in the next room. It was handwritten, cold, precise. For the sake of the family legacy, it would be wise to remain quiet. You've already embarrassed us enough. Miho's marriage to Sora is being finalized. Any further media drama will be seen as a direct attack on our company. We recommend you decline future interviews. At the bottom, be the mother, not the martyr. Jaiwoo read it twice, then a third time, and she laughed, loud and bitter. Hyerin looked up from the sink. What now? She handed her the letter. Hyerin read it, eyes narrowing. They're scared. Good, Jaiwoo said. They should be. She didn't burn the letter. She framed it, hung it above her makeshift desk in the living room. A reminder, not of threat, but of fuel. That week, Jaiwoo launched the first community event at the building. It wasn't finished, but she opened it anyway. A soft launch, she told the public, but really she just wanted people to see the dream in progress. Single mothers showed up, women carrying babies in slings, teen girls with notebooks, widows, survivors, fighters. Jaiwoo stood at the front, holding a microphone with trembling fingers. She looked at the crowd, at all the tired, strong, uncertain eyes looking back at her. I'm not here to tell you how to be brave, she began. I'm just here to say, sometimes being broken is what makes you strong. Sometimes being left behind is what teaches you how to build. Applause, tears, and in the back row, a man stood silently in a dark coat, watching her. Jaiwoo didn't see him, but he saw her, and in his jaw a quiet clench. In his hand, a phone. Miho wasn't done, but neither was she. This was it. It wasn't finished yet. Wires still hung from the ceiling, and the sound of drills echoed from the far room. But the heart of it was alive. The structure had come back to life. So had she. 3 months had passed since the babies had come home. 3 months of crying at 2 a.m. and again at 4. 3 months of falling asleep beside cribs, of feeding bottles with half-open eyes, of diaper changes and lullabies and overwhelming silence when they didn't cry. 3 months of learning how to be 3 mothers in one. And now this, her project, her dream, the Han Women's Center. She had chosen to keep the name, not as a tie to Miho, but as a statement, a reclamation. She would turn what had once shamed her into a badge of survival. She watched as a mother walked in with a toddler on her hip, eyes wide as she took in the space. Is this really open to the public? The woman asked, hesitant. Jaiwoo smiled. It's open to you. By afternoon, the room was full, women of every age, shape, and story. A small pop-up clinic was operating in the corner. Free consultations, diaper drives, skill-building classes. There was a quiet hum of belonging, of unspoken healing. As Jaiwoo moved through the crowd, thanking each volunteer, she heard snippets of conversation. I haven't had a job since my divorce. This place makes me feel human again. I thought I was alone, but the world didn't like women who rose from ashes, especially not when they rose too high. The first real threat came 2 days later. A major donor withdrew their support, quietly, without explanation. Then another. Jaiwoo received a short email from one of her board contacts. Corporate interests are being threatened. Your ex-husband's team is pressuring partners behind the scenes. She stared at the screen for a long time. Then she whispered, he's trying to bleed us. When she told Hyerin, her best friend went still. He's afraid of how visible you've become. I don't care about being visible, Jaiwoo snapped. I care about this, these women, this center. Then we fight. Again. That night, Jaiwoo stayed late at the center, working on grant applications by the soft light of her laptop. Her babies were home, asleep under the care of Hyerin's aunt. And for once, the silence didn't feel lonely, until she heard a door close. Not a soft click, a slam. She turned sharply, her heart racing. Footsteps echoed down the hall. Slow, purposeful. Jaiwoo rose from her chair, her fingers tightening around her phone. Then he appeared. Miho. He stepped into the light, dressed in a tailored coat, his hair perfect, his expression unreadable. Jaiwoo's breath caught. Her body tensed like a wire pulled too tight. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice low. "This place," he said, looking around. "You really did it." She said nothing. He walked forward, past the tables, past the shelves stacked with donated clothes, past the wall lined with children's art. He stopped in front of her. "You could have come to me," he said softly, "for support, for help." Jaiwoo laughed bitterly. "Help? You tried to erase me. You told your lawyers I was mentally unstable from childbirth, that I was unfit to raise them." His jaw clenched. "I had to protect the company." "There it is," she snapped. "The company. Always first." Miho looked at her then, really looked. "You're different," he murmured. "Yes," she replied, "because I had to be." For a moment, silence hung between them. "I saw your speech," he said. "The one about broken things being beautiful. You looked." He didn't finish. Jaiwoo stepped back. "Don't come here again," she said. "This space is sacred." He blinked. Sacred. Yes, it was built with pain, with tears, with every piece of myself you tried to destroy. Miho lowered his gaze. "Do you really think I wanted to hurt you? You didn't care enough not to." Silence again. He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "This is a proposal. Joint custody. Fair agreement. No courts. No press." She didn't take it. "I'll let my lawyer read it," she said flatly. "I just want to be part of their lives," he added. "Even if you hate me." She stared at him for a long moment. "You were part of their lives the moment you left me. That decision shaped everything." He didn't reply, just placed the envelope on the table and left. Jaiwoo sat down slowly, shaking. The air still felt like him, heavy, cold. But she didn't cry. She picked up her pen, and she kept writing. She moved through her day like a quiet rhythm, feeding, cleaning, soothing, holding. It was exhausting, unrelenting, but it was hers. No one could take that from her now. Still, something was shifting. Jaiwoo had noticed it slowly, like a splinter under the skin. Not painful at first, just present. Lingering. Miho had gone quiet. Since leaving the proposal, there had been no visits, no new letters, no messages through lawyers. The silence should have felt like peace. But instead, it felt like a held breath. Waiting. And that silence was about to shatter. Jaiwoo was changing Hajun's onesie when Hyeren burst through the door, her face pale. "He's crashing," she said breathlessly. Jaiwoo looked up, startled. "What?" "Miho. His company. It's all over the news." She hurried into the living room, switching on the TV. The screen lit up with bold red headlines. Han Corporation under investigation for fraudulent contracts. Stocks plummet. CEO Miho Han silent amidst scandal. Jaiwoo stood frozen. Hajun still in her arms. "They're accusing him of funneling development funds into offshore accounts," Hyeren said, eyes wide. "Internal audits. Employee testimonies. It's unraveling." Jaiwoo lowered herself slowly onto the couch, holding her baby tighter. This wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was something far more complicated. She had imagined this moment, when karma would come for him, when the empire he'd chosen over her would crack and crumble. But now that it was real, she only felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. A message. "Can we talk?" "Miho." Jaiwoo stared at the screen for a long time. Then, without replying, she stood, walked to the bedroom, and laid Hajun gently in his crib. The babies slept peacefully as the wind outside whispered like ghosts of all the things unsaid. Later that evening, she met him. Not in a lawyer's office or a boardroom. Not in some polished hotel suite like the old Miho would have chosen. But in a quiet, deserted park by the shore, where they used to walk years ago before the money, before the betrayal. He was already there when she arrived. Leaning against a bench. No coat. No polished smile. Just Miho. Tired, older, stripped of the shine he'd worn like armor for so long. She approached slowly. You came, he said quietly. Jaiwoo stopped a few feet away. What do you want? Miho exhaled. Everything's falling apart. I saw. I didn't do what they're accusing me of. At least, not all of it. His voice cracked slightly. But I let things happen. I let people handle things without looking. I was too busy chasing her. Jaiwoo cut in sharp. He flinched. Yes, and everything else. Status, applause, control, silence. She looked out at the ocean. It was dark tonight. No stars, just waves. I built that company from the ground up, he said. And I still lost everything. Jaiwoo's jaw tightened. You didn't lose everything. You gave it away. Miho looked at her. I think I always knew, he whispered, that the moment I walked out that door, I was walking away from the only part of me that mattered. She met his eyes then. There was no rage left, no need for revenge, just a sorrow that ran so deep, it had turned into quiet resilience. I begged you, she said softly, not to go. I was carrying your children. I was still dreaming about the life we promised. And you looked at me like I was a mistake. Miho swallowed hard, his voice barely audible. I hated myself for that. I still do. Jaiwoo shook her head. It's too late for guilt, Miho. I don't need your regret. I don't even need your apology. Then why did you come? He asked. She paused. Then, because I wanted to look you in the eyes and see if you changed. And I'm still deciding. Miho let out a hollow laugh. I want to be part of their lives, he said. Not because of image or pressure, because they're all I have left. And I need something real. Jaiwoo studied him, the broken edges, the desperation carefully tucked beneath the surface. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the ocean and let the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Then, without looking at him, she said, You can't just walk back in. I'm not asking to. Good, she whispered, because they're not a second chance. They're people, innocent, whole, and they don't need a father who's only here because the world stopped clapping. Miho stepped closer, but not too close. What do they need? Jaiwoo finally looked at him again. They need someone who shows up, quietly, consistently, without expecting applause. He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I can do that. She tilted her head, doubtful but not dismissive. We'll see. And with that, she turned and walked away. Not fast, not triumphant, just steady. Behind her, Miho stood alone in the dark, watching the woman he once abandoned become the woman he would never again deserve. She had almost said no, but Hiren had looked her in the eyes that morning and said, You've already walked through fire. What's one more room full of men? Jaiwoo stood now in a place she once believed she'd never see again. Surrounded by tailored suits, whispered negotiations, and champagne flutes. She wore navy. Strong, simple, elegant. Her hair swept back, her chin lifted. The program listed her name just beneath the title, Keynote. Rebuilding with purpose, the strength of starting over. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the letters. And then, a voice behind her, low, too familiar. You really came. She turned. Miho stood just feet away, dressed in charcoal gray, his tie slightly loosened. But it was his eyes that caught her, not with arrogance this time, but with something quieter, tired, unsure. I was invited, she said, keeping her tone cool. I know, he nodded. You deserve to be. Jaiwoo glanced around. Cameras, people, watching, waiting. She didn't want to be part of a spectacle, not with him. Not now. What are you doing here? She asked. They asked me to speak on legacy. Irony, isn't it? She didn't laugh. I won't stay long, he added quickly. Just wanted to say I saw the center, the expansion plans, the outreach program in Busan. It's amazing. Thank you, she replied, soft but distant. There was a long pause. Then Miho lowered his voice. I haven't told anyone this, but the board is voting to remove me next week. Temporary, they say, until the dust settles. But we both know what that means. Jaiwoo studied him. He looked smaller here. Not physically, but spiritually. A man whose empire was crumbling from the inside out. "What do you want me to say, Miho?" she asked gently but firmly. "That I'm sorry? That you didn't deserve this?" "No," he whispered. "I just needed to tell someone who'd understand what it's like to be reduced to nothing." Her breath hitched at that, because she did understand. Too well. But she also knew that their versions of nothing had never been the same. Miho looked down. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but if I could say one thing to them, to the kids, what should it be?" Jaiwoo's eyes watered, not from pain, but from the weight of his question. "Tell them you're sorry," she said, "but don't expect them to understand it yet. Just keep showing up. One quiet visit at a time." He nodded, swallowing hard. The announcement for her speech rang through the hall. Jaiwoo turned slowly, walking toward the stage. As she passed him, she stopped briefly. "You once told me I wasn't ambitious enough," she said softly, without turning her head. "Turns out, I was just building something bigger than you could see." And then she walked away, each step echoing louder than any applause. The lights dimmed. Jaiwoo stood before the podium, heart pounding. She scanned the crowd. Dozens of faces, dozens of stories. "My name is Jaiwoo Han," she began, "and I used to believe that success meant applause, that love meant being chosen, that pain meant failure." She paused, letting the silence settle. "I was wrong." Her voice was steady now, rising with each word. "Pain is not weakness. Loss is not the end. And being broken doesn't mean you're beyond repair. It means you have space to rebuild, to redefine, to rise." People leaned in, listening. "I don't come from money. I don't carry a famous name anymore. But I carry 3 lives that changed me. And I built a place where other women, abandoned, silenced, underestimated, could come and find their voices again." A murmur of emotion moved through the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "If you're looking for the next investment, find someone who's been to the bottom and still got up. That's the kind of strength you can't teach. That's the kind of power that changes the world." The room erupted in applause. She stepped down, heart full, throat tight, and in the corner of the room, Miho stood silent, still, watching the woman he once thought too quiet become the voice that no one could ignore. People didn't just applaud, they stood. A standing ovation that shook her to the core, not because of pride, but because of release. Years of silence. Years of being unseen, dismissed, discarded. In that moment, the sound wasn't just approval. It was witness. She smiled graciously, bowed her head slightly, and walked off stage into the quiet corridor behind the ballroom, her heart still racing. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of messages. Some from board members, others from women she had never met. One read, "I was planning to give up today. Then I heard you. Thank you for choosing to live." Jaiwoo covered her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. But peace, as always in her life, didn't last long. She was walking through the backstage hallway toward the dressing area when she saw him. Miho, not alone. Beside him stood Sora. She looked thinner than before, but her gaze was sharp. Too sharp, like glass pretending to be diamonds. And in her hands was a phone, raised slightly, the camera still open. Jaiwoo froze. Miho noticed her first. "Jaiwoo, what are you doing?" Jaiwoo asked, voice low. Sora smiled. "Relax, just capturing the moment. For memories." Jaiwoo's stomach twisted. "Were you recording me?" Sora tilted her head. "You said so many inspiring things up there. I thought maybe the public deserved to hear the unedited version." Jaiwoo took a step forward. "Delete it. I don't take orders from you," Sora snapped, but her voice trembled just slightly. Miho stepped in. "Sora, stop." "Why? Afraid someone might realize your ex-wife is profiting from your downfall?" she hissed. Jaiwoo narrowed her eyes. "That speech wasn't about you, or him. It was about every woman who's ever been pushed to the edge and still came back stronger." Sora rolled her eyes. "You're not a hero. You're a brand now. You sell pain and call it empowerment. Miho's jaw tightened. Enough. Sora laughed bitterly, turning on him. You don't get to tell me what's enough, Miho. You wanted a new life. You got one. With a woman who actually understands ambition. Jaiwu's voice was calm, but cold. If you really understood ambition, you wouldn't waste it on tearing down someone else's survival. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Sora stepped closer, voice low and venomous. You think you've won, don't you? But people forget. Sympathy fades. You're just the flavor of the moment, Jaiwu. A few more interviews, a few more tears, and the world will move on. Jaiwu met her eyes, steady and unflinching. Maybe, she said softly. But even if they forget my name, the women I've helped will remember what it felt like to believe again. And that's enough. Sora looked shaken. Just a crack in the armor. But it was there. Jaiwu turned to Miho. You need to choose who you're going to be next. Not for me. For them. For our children. He looked like he wanted to say something more, but she was already walking away, her spine straight, her steps echoing down the marble floor with quiet defiance. Back in the dressing room, Jaiwu collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling slightly. Hiren rushed in moments later. I saw them. What happened? Jaiwu shook her head. She tried to provoke me. He just stood there. But I said what I needed to say. Hiren knelt in front of her. You didn't just survive that. You owned it. I don't want a war, Jaiwu whispered. I want peace. But I'm starting to realize that peace has a price. Hiren reached out and took her hand. Then let them pay it. You've already given enough. There was a knock at the door. A young assistant peeked in. Miss Han, there's a reporter outside. She says she's not here to talk about the scandal. Just you. Jaiwu hesitated. Send her in, she said after a moment. The reporter was soft-spoken, mid-30s, eyes kind behind thick glasses. Thank you for seeing me, she began, notebook in hand. I'm not here for gossip. I'm here because I watched your speech, and it felt like I was hearing my own story. Jaiwu nodded. Then you already know everything that matters. The reporter smiled. Can I ask just one question? Jaiwu folded her hands. Of course. If you could go back to the moment everything fell apart and speak to that version of yourself, the one who was left, alone, terrified, what would you say? Jaiwu's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at her lap, remembering the floor of that apartment, the hospital room, the NICU, the sound of rain, her voice, broken and desperate. She looked back up. I'd tell her to stand, she whispered, even if her legs are shaking, even if her heart is shattered. I'd tell her that one day, she'll walk into rooms that once felt impossible. And she won't just survive them, she'll own them. The reporter's eyes filled with tears. And in that moment, Jaiwu realized this was no longer about reclaiming her story. It was about amplifying every voice that had been silenced. They were everything, the anchor that had kept her steady in the worst storms. And now, as another storm approached, one far more dangerous than any she could see, she felt that old heaviness creeping back into her chest. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. She stared at it for a moment before answering. Jaiwu Han, she said, voice low. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. I thought you might want to know, he said. Sora filed a defamation suit this morning. Claims your speech at the forum implied misconduct. She's demanding a public apology and financial compensation. Jaiwu closed her eyes. Of course. I never even mentioned her name, she whispered. You didn't have to, the voice replied. She's angry, and she wants to ruin you. She hung up before he could say anything more. By the time the sun rose fully, the internet was already on fire. Sora Young sues ex-wife of Miho Han for defamation. Public fallout continues between new couple and the CEO mother. Did Jaiwu Han cross a line? Jaiwu sat at the kitchen table, scrolling in silence. Hiren burst through the door 15 minutes later, still in pajamas, hair wild. I saw it. Are you okay? She wants to break me, Jaiwu said. not looking up. She's not just going after me now. She's going after the center, our funding, our credibility, everything. She's threatened, Hiram muttered. You made people listen. You gave women like her no place to hide. Jaiwoo exhaled shakily, pressing her hands to her face. I can't do this again. I don't want to go to court. I don't want the babies in headlines. I just want peace, Hiram. I want my life to be mine. Hiram sat down beside her. Then fight, but fight smarter, not louder. We've done this before. We'll do it again. Later that afternoon, as the babies napped and Jaiwoo reviewed legal documents, there was a knock at the door. A slow, hesitant knock. She opened it cautiously, and there he was, Miho, standing in the hallway, soaked from the rain. His shoulders hunched, his eyes hollow. I'm not here to argue, he said quickly. I'm not even here for me. Jaiwoo didn't speak. She waited. He took a slow breath. I ended it. With Sora. The words dropped like stones between them. She told me last night that if I didn't help her destroy you, she'd release private videos. Things from the past. Things I never knew she recorded. Jaiwoo's stomach turned. She's unraveling, he said. And I let her in. I let her control everything. I was so busy trying to rebuild my image that I didn't see what I'd become. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You saw. You just didn't care. Miho lowered his head. You're right. Silence stretched between them. I came here to ask for one thing, he said. Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. Jaiwoo's voice was calm but firm. Then what? Let me help protect the center. Let me use what's left of my influence to shield it from this lawsuit. From her. She narrowed her eyes. And what do you want in return? Nothing, he said quickly. I mean it. Nothing. I watched you build something beautiful. I destroyed too much already. I want to help save something, even if I don't deserve to. Jaiwoo didn't respond right away. The old her, the one who clung to hope and believed in second chances, might have accepted his offer without hesitation. But that woman had been burned. Still, this wasn't about him. This was about them, about her children, about the women who needed the center to exist. If you interfere, she said slowly, it will be on my terms. You'll stay invisible, quiet, no press, no interviews, no credit. Miho nodded. Anything. And if I find out you're doing it for your own redemption, you won't, he interrupted softly. I know I can't redeem myself, but I can be useful. Jaiwoo held his gaze. Then help me protect what matters, she whispered. I will. She closed the door without saying goodbye. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something strange curling in her chest. Not trust, not hope, but a small, wary truce. One she would break without hesitation, if needed. Iwu stood in her office, holding a crumpled letter in one hand and a bottle of formula in the other. Her mind was elsewhere. It had been days since Sora's lawsuit hit the news, and now her center, her sanctuary, was under threat of a temporary shutdown order issued by a local council member with known ties to Han Corporation's board. The excuse was flimsy. Concerns over operational permits and zoning issues. The truth was obvious. They were being squeezed. Politely, legally, brutally. Do they really think they can silence us like this? Hiram asked, pacing behind her. We did everything right. Everything. They're not after logic, Jaiwoo murmured. They're after noise. They want to shake us until we fall apart. A knock on the office door cut through the tension. A volunteer peeked in, eyes wide. There's someone here to see you. Jaiwoo blinked. Now's not. It's your son's teacher, from the child development wing. She says it's important. Jaiwoo nodded slowly. Send her in. A young woman stepped in, nervous, holding a small clipboard. She bowed slightly. Miss Han, I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you should know, Jay. He asked about his father today. Jaiwoo's breath hitched. She hadn't expected the question to come so soon. They were only toddlers. They didn't even fully understand the concept of family. But still, children always sensed absence like a shadow. What did he say? Jaiwoo asked, her voice suddenly hollow. The teacher looked down at her notes. He said, "Why doesn't Daddy come pick us up?" He said he sees other dads, and he wanted to know if his is invisible. Jaiwoo sat slowly in her chair, her heart aching in slow, twisting pulses. "Thank you for telling me," she said after a long silence. The teacher hesitated. "I didn't know if it was my place, but I thought maybe you'd want to prepare. These questions won't stop." After she left, Jaiwoo sat staring at the wall, her vision blurred. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk. Invisibility, that's what Miho had been to them. Not abusive, not present, not even a distant voice over a call. Just absent, not even a shadow, not even a myth. Hiren stepped forward. "You're not obligated to explain anything." "I am," Jaiwoo said quietly. "Not to the world, but to them." The rest of the day passed in a haze. Meetings, messages, a press inquiry she ignored, a bank call she answered and regretted. The fight was closing in from all sides. But when night came, Jaiwoo did what she hadn't done before. She called Miho. He answered after 2 rings. "Jaiwoo, can you come over?" Her voice trembled. "I'm not calling to argue." There was a pause. "Of course, I'll be there." That night, he arrived at the apartment dressed simply. No suit, no security, just him. He looked unsure, vulnerable, like a man walking into a room he didn't believe he had the right to enter. Jaiwoo opened the door without a word and stepped aside. The babies were in the living room, Jae playing with blocks, Hajun asleep in a corner crib, and Somin curled on a blanket, humming to herself. Miho's eyes softened. "They're beautiful. They're yours?" Jaiwoo said, unable to hide the crack in her voice. He knelt slowly beside Jae, unsure whether he'd be welcome. But Jae just looked at him curiously, cocking his head. "Are you a new friend?" the little boy asked. Miho's lips trembled. "Maybe, but I'm hoping I could be something more." Jae blinked. "Like a daddy?" Jaiwoo turned her face away, trying not to cry. Miho nodded slowly. "Yes, like a daddy." Jae studied him. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The question hung in the air, sharper than any accusation. Miho swallowed. "Because I was scared and selfish, and I didn't know how to be the person you deserved." Jae didn't understand all of it, but he nodded thoughtfully, then reached out and touched Miho's cheek. "Don't be scared now. We have toys." Miho laughed through tears. Later, after the children had gone to sleep, Jaiwoo and Miho sat on the balcony, a small lamp glowing beside them, casting long shadows. "He asked if you were invisible," Jaiwoo whispered. Miho looked down. "Maybe I was. You need to be consistent, Miho. No more grand gestures. No more vanishing. They will remember now. Every time you don't show up. Every broken promise." "I know," he said. "I don't expect them to love me. I just want the chance to earn their trust. One moment at a time." Jaiwoo turned to face him. "If you ever fail them the way you failed me, I won't forgive you. I won't ask you to." The wind blew softly around them. Miho looked at her, eyes tired but genuine. "You've become everything I couldn't be." She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because for the first time he wasn't saying it for her. He was saying it to himself. Folded in half, hand-delivered. No sender's name, no seal. Just Jaiwoo's name written in neat, sharp strokes on the front. She opened it slowly, her hands still sticky with formula from feeding Somin. Her heart already beating faster before her eyes had even scanned the first line. It wasn't from Miho. It was from Sora. "If you want peace, silence yourself. You've won the sympathy. You've played the martyr. Now disappear gracefully. Because if you don't, what I know, what I hold, will be released." Jaiwoo read it twice, 3 times. The handwriting was too clean to be hers, too meticulous. But the tone, it was unmistakable. Cruel, composed, perfectly calibrated. She walked to the kitchen table and set the letter down. For a few minutes, she just stood there, the clock ticking louder than usual, the soft sound of the babies playing in the next room echoing like reminders of what was at stake. When Hiren walked in, her voice cheerful from outside. She immediately froze at the look on Jaiwoo's face. What happened? Jaiwoo didn't speak, just handed her the letter. Hiren read it silently, then let out a slow breath. She's bluffing. She's scared. Or she's desperate, Jaiwoo said. Which is worse? Hiren narrowed her eyes. You're not seriously considering backing down? Jaiwoo shook her head slowly. No, but I'm seriously considering what she might have. The next few hours passed like a ghost through Jaiwoo's body. She fed. She cleaned. She kissed her baby's foreheads. But her mind was somewhere else, replaying every moment from her past with Miho, every closed door, every whispered argument, every detail she had tried to forget. What had Sora seen? What had she kept? By nightfall, Jaiwoo found herself back at the center, long after everyone had gone home. The halls were quiet, the lights dim. She stood in the main room, her eyes on the wall that read, "You are not broken. You are rebuilding." Her fingers touched the words gently. Then she heard the door open behind her. She turned. Miho. He looked tense, his shoulders tight, his jaw set. "I heard," he said simply. "She sent me a copy too." Jaiwoo's stomach twisted. "So she's not bluffing?" "No," he said. "She's not. She has footage. From years ago. Conversations. Fights. Probably stuff from the old apartment. Before I even realized she was capable of it." "She recorded us?" Jaiwoo's voice cracked. Miho nodded, eyes dark. "She kept everything, and now she wants to leak it. Selectively. Edit it to make you look unstable. Angry. Manipulative." Jaiwoo laughed softly, bitterly. "I was angry. I was unstable. You left me pregnant and alone, Miho. What does she think I was supposed to do? Smile into the silence?" "I know," he whispered. "I know, but the public won't. Not when she controls the narrative." Jaiwoo crossed her arms tightly. "So what now? She wins." Miho shook his head. "Not if we tell the truth before she does." Jaiwoo stared at him, her eyes narrowing. "You mean go public?" "Yes," he said, "but not with denials. Not with damage control. With everything. The truth. What I did. What she did. What we all lost." She took a step back. "You destroy your name. Your legacy." He looked down. "There's not much left of it anyway. But maybe I can use the ashes for something good." Silence stretched between them. Jaiwoo turned her back to him, staring out the tall windows of the center. The rain had started again. A soft drizzle that clung to the glass like tears refusing to fall. "Do you remember the day you left?" she asked suddenly. "You didn't say goodbye. You didn't even look at me. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a spoon, wondering if I'd imagined the last 5 years." Miho swallowed hard. "I remember." She turned back to him slowly. "Then you go first. You speak first. You tell the truth with your name on it, with your shame in your voice. Because I've already bled in public. I'm not doing it alone again." He nodded. "I will." Jaiwoo stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "If you try to protect yourself at my expense again, I will destroy you with everything I have left." "I won't," he said. "I'm done lying." She stared at him for a long moment, reading every line on his face. Then she nodded. "We do it tomorrow." As he turned to leave, Jaiwoo walked back to the wall and stood beneath the words once more. Her eyes burned, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything she had carried, and everything she was about to unleash. No press conference, no polished production, no script, just Miho, sitting in a plain room with bare walls and a small glass of water untouched on the table beside him. His face was tired, his eyes darker than usual, and for the first time he didn't look like a CEO. He looked like a man stripped bare. Jaiwoo watched from the office of the center, the laptop open in front of her, her fingers clenched around the edge of the desk. The room was silent except for the sound of his voice, raw, uncertain. "My name is Miho Han. I've spent most of my adult life building an image, and I've hurt a lot of people trying to protect it. I lied. I cheated. I walked away from my wife while she was pregnant. I left her to carry a burden that was never meant to be hers alone. I became the man I once promised I'd never be. Jaiwoo's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to go that deep. Not like this. What you've heard in the news, it's real. And what you haven't heard is worse. For years, I let others speak for me, shape my silence into something clean. But silence is a form of violence. And I've stayed silent for too long. He paused. Jaiwoo Han, my ex-wife, is not just the mother of my children. She's the one who carried the weight of my failures and still stood tall. She built something while I destroyed everything. If you have to choose between believing her or me, believe her. The video ended not with a dramatic line or an apology, but with a breath. Just a single breath, like someone who had finally come up for air after drowning in his own lies. Jaiwoo sat still for a long moment. Then she closed the laptop. A knock at the door broke the silence. Hiren stepped in, holding her phone. It's everywhere. Every channel. Every platform. People are stunned. Jaiwoo looked up. Do they believe him? They believe you, Hiren said, eyes softening. Finally, without needing your pain to prove it. Later that afternoon, Jaiwoo walked into the main hall of the center where the team had gathered. Volunteers, staff, even a few of the mothers who used the space daily. They all looked at her with something new in their eyes. Not pity, not curiosity, but deep, quiet respect. One of the younger volunteers stepped forward nervously. Jaiwoo, we're proud of you, and we've got your back. Jaiwoo smiled, but her heart was still beating fast. There was no time for celebration yet, because Sora wouldn't stay quiet. That evening, just as the sun began to set, Jaiwoo received another letter. This one wasn't folded neatly. It was crumpled, almost torn. The ink smudged like it had been gripped too tightly. Inside, only a single line. You think this changes everything, but you have no idea how deep I planted the rot. Jaiwoo stared at the paper, her hands shaking slightly. This wasn't desperation anymore. This was war. A final threat from someone who was losing control and becoming more dangerous because of it. That night, Jaiwoo didn't sleep. She paced the apartment while the babies slept, checked every lock, stared out the window waiting for something. She didn't know what. A crash? A call? A scream? Around 2:13 a.m., her phone lit up. A voicemail. Blocked number. With trembling hands, she played it. It was Sora. Her voice was calm. Too calm. It's funny, isn't it? You win the hearts of strangers by telling half a truth. But tell me, Jaiwoo, would they still love you if they knew what you said the night before he left? If they knew what you threatened him with? You think Miho was the only one who failed? Jaiwoo's breath caught. She sat on the floor, phone still in hand, cold washing over her. She had forgotten that night, or maybe buried it. The night she'd screamed at Miho in a moment of fear, said things she hadn't meant, things she hadn't even believed. If you walk out that door, I'll make sure they never know your name. Words born from betrayal, not truth, but weaponized in the wrong hands, they could be twisted, rewritten, and Sora had recordings. Of course she did. Jaiwoo rested her head against the wall, her fingers trembling. But then, she remembered something. The center, the mothers, the women who had shown up every day and found pieces of themselves in her story. They didn't follow her because she was perfect. They followed her because she wasn't, because she had made mistakes, survived them, grown from them. She stood slowly, walked to her desk, and opened her laptop again. A new video. No makeup, no edits, no defense, just truth. She looked straight into the camera. My name is Jaiwoo Han, and I've been angry. I've said things I regret. I've wanted to hurt the people who hurt me. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either because I learned from it. I didn't stay in that darkness. I fought my way out. She took a breath. I know there are people trying to twist the truth, to make me look like the villain. But here's the thing. You can't scare a woman who's already walked through hell. She clicked upload. And then, finally, she rested her head against the window as the city below slowly began to wake. The truth was out now. All of it. And whatever storm came next, She was ready. Her phone buzzed in her hand like a warning siren, a vibrating reminder that peace was, once again, only temporary. Breaking. Leaked audio allegedly features Jai Woo Han threatening to cut ex-husband from children's lives. You walk out that door, and I'll make sure they never know your name. Audio clip stirs online debate, public divided. Was it pain or manipulation? She sat in her car, parked just outside the entrance, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her face remained still, numb. A slow exhale escaped her lips. She had expected it. She had known it was coming, and still it felt like a slap to the soul. The door of the passenger seat opened suddenly, and Hiren slid in, phone in hand, her face flushed with frustration. "They're calling it abuse," she said, almost out of breath. "A mother using her kids to punish a man. Comment sections are a war zone. Some people are defending you, but others, I know," Jaiwa whispered. She turned her head, watching raindrops scatter across the windshield. The sound of the storm outside was soothing, familiar. For a moment, she let herself get lost in it. "I said those words," she continued, her voice low and calm. "Not as a plan, not as a strategy, just because I was scared, because everything was falling apart and I wanted him to feel what I felt." "You don't owe anyone an explanation," Hiren snapped. "But I do," Jaiwoo said gently. To them, her eyes drifted toward the center's front doors, where a group of mothers were beginning to gather under umbrellas, whispering, glancing around. They had seen the news too. They always did. "If they think I'm just like everyone else who hurt them," Jaiwoo continued, "then I failed them." Hiren didn't speak. She just reached over and placed her hand on Jaiwoo's. An hour later, Jaiwoo stood at the front of the community room. No cameras this time, no reporters, just the people who mattered, the women who came to the center every week for support, for shelter, for hope. Some held babies in their arms. Some sat in chairs with their arms folded tightly across their chests. Some avoided eye contact. She took a deep breath. "I won't pretend I'm perfect," she began. "I won't pretend I haven't made mistakes. Some of you have seen the news, heard the audio." A ripple moved through the crowd, quiet but palpable. "I said that to Miho. I did. And not because I wanted to hurt him, but because I was hurt, because I was drowning in fear and rage and pain. And in that moment, I thought the only power I had left was to push back." Her voice cracked. She didn't stop. "I'm not proud of it, but I won't hide from it either, because healing isn't linear. It's messy and ugly, and sometimes it brings out the worst in us before we find the strength to become our best." A long silence stretched before one woman, sitting near the back, finally raised her hand. "What changed you?" Jaiwoo looked at her, then glanced toward the hallway where her children's laughter echoed faintly from the nursery. "They did," she said softly. "3 tiny hearts who had no idea they were born into chaos. They saved me from becoming what I feared most, someone who lets pain decide her path." The woman nodded. Another one wiped her eyes. One more clapped softly, then another. And soon, the room filled with quiet applause. Not explosive, but real, warm, forgiving. Afterward, Jaiwoo stepped outside into the misty air. The drizzle had stopped, but the clouds remained. She liked it that way. Gray skies were honest. She sat on the bench near the garden, eyes closed, letting the wind brush past her. A familiar voice broke the quiet. "Your video, your words today. They reached more people than Sora ever could with her poison." Jaiwoo turned. Miho stood beside her, holding a small plastic bag with what looked like toys, simple, soft ones. He sat beside her. "She's losing ground," he said. "Fast. Sponsors are pulling away from her foundation." She released a second clip earlier today, trying to paint herself as the victim. "But people are starting to see through it." "I don't want to celebrate that," Jaiwoo replied. "It doesn't bring peace, just more noise." "I know," he said, "but maybe it brings protection. For you, for them." They both looked out toward the sidewalk, where a mother was helping her daughter climb over a puddle. "You know," Miho said, voice distant, "I think part of me always hoped you'd fall, not because I hated you, but because I hated that you could live without me, thrive without me." Jaiwoo looked at him slowly. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me," she murmured. "I've told myself a lot of lies," he said, "but not anymore. I'm done pretending I was ever the victim in our story." She nodded, then turned back toward the trees. "You were right, you know," she said. "Back then, when I told you they'd never know your name. I meant it. I really did." "And now?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. Jaiwoo's voice was soft. "Now, I want them to know who you became, not who you were." Miho closed his eyes. That night, Jaiwoo tucked her children into bed, their soft breathing like lullabies against the storm still echoing on the edge of the world. She looked at them, 3 tiny lives, untouched by the fire that forged her. And for the first time, she believed the worst was behind her. But she still slept with her phone on the nightstand, because peace had always come in borrowed moments, and tomorrow was still unwritten. She had barely sat down at the table when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. She hesitated, then answered. Jaiwoo Han speaking. A low voice replied, steady, unfamiliar. "Miss Han, I'm calling from the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office. We'd like to ask you some questions regarding the activities of Miss Sora Young. In particular, recent allegations of extortion and illegal surveillance." Jaiwoo's grip on the phone tightened. I'm sorry. What? "We have reason to believe that certain recordings and data in Miss Young's possession were obtained without consent, including from you and Mr. Miho Han. You're not under investigation, but you are a potential key witness." Jaiwoo stared at the wall, her mind spinning. "I'll cooperate," she said quietly. "Just tell me what you need." When the call ended, she sat motionless. Hiren came in moments later with a bag of groceries and took one look at Jaiwoo's face. "What happened?" "They're investigating her," Jaiwoo said numbly. "Officially, for blackmail, illegal surveillance, extortion." Hiren's eyes widened. "Wait, they're actually doing it? Not just rumors?" Jaiwoo nodded. "They want me to testify, and Miho too." Hiren sat down slowly. "Jaiwoo, this could be the end of it. Really, she might finally face consequences." Jaiwoo leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, fingers pressed against her temples. "And it means opening everything again, repeating everything, in a courtroom, on record. You're not alone this time." Jaiwoo nodded, though part of her still wasn't sure she believed that. A few days later, she found herself walking into a government building under gray skies, Miho beside her in silence. They hadn't spoken much since that day on the bench. But today wasn't about their history. It was about ending something that had threatened to consume all of them. They were led into separate rooms. Jaiwoo sat across from a kind-eyed prosecutor who didn't rush her, who simply pressed record and said, "Begin whenever you're ready." She closed her eyes, and she told everything, from the first warning signs to the anonymous letters, from the veiled threats to the leaked recordings. From the first voicemail to the crumpled letter she still kept in her drawer like a bruise. She didn't cry, not once, but her voice trembled when she spoke of the children. "She wanted them to be leverage," she whispered. "She wanted to weaponize their existence against me, against him, against truth." When it was over, she sat in silence for a long time. The prosecutor switched off the recorder gently. "You were incredibly brave, Miss Han. I know that word gets overused, but you were." She nodded once, her voice soft. "I just want them to grow up without fear." Outside, Miho was waiting by the doors. He looked pale, exhausted, but more still, as if something inside him had finally stopped spinning. He looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, there was no guilt in his face, no shame, just quiet understanding. "I told them everything," he said. "Me too." They walked to the car in silence, the rain just starting to fall. Later that night, Jaiwoo stood in the nursery, watching the babies sleep. She leaned over Jay's crib and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred but didn't wake. Miho's voice came from behind her, low. "Can I stay for a while?" She didn't turn around, just whispered, "Why?" "Because I don't want to keep missing this," he said. "I know I don't deserve your trust, or their love, but I want to be better." She slowly turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not ready to forget," she said, "and I'm not ready to forgive. I'm not asking you to, but they deserve consistency," she added. "If you mean what you say, prove it. Show up, quietly, without expecting anything back." Miho stepped closer, his voice breaking. "I will. Promise."